Hey, Craig. Good subject, and one that I kind of wrestled with myself a year or so ago. Um, I'm First off, I want to start with the idea that secondary fermentation is a bit of a misnomer. When you make a beer and you put it in the fermenter, when it's done, it's done. Putting it into another fermenter doesn't make it magically somehow ferment again. So, normally what would happen is you'd have that one, two, three thing. You'd make the beer, you'd put it in the fermenter for a week, you'd put it in the secondary for 2 weeks, then you'd put it in the bottle or keg and condition it for 3 weeks, and then you drink it. Which is what I did because I was told to, because I read Papazian, when I first started brewing, like most guys did. The Papazian's information was based on how things were in the mid 80s, early 90s, maybe. And I'm not going to say they were wrong, but at this point, I think that secondary fermenters are not necessary in general. And they're probably not even necessary for the vast majority of beers that any of us will make. At this point, I only use them when there are things I've added to the beer that I don't want to be in the fermenter for extended periods of time. I do not, like if I'm going to dry hop or add oak chips, I don't put them in a bag and add them to the fermenter. I just go ahead and dump them in there. And oak chips, for example, I only want to be in there for 4 or 5 days, something like that. So I transfer over. In general, I would rather leave the beer in the fermenter longer. An example, and an example that I'm reminded of by some of the comments to your video. People saying, "Well, I leave it in the primary for 14 days," and I see the 14 days thing a lot. And the reason I see that is because that's what the instruction sheets say, and or maybe Papazian say something about this 14 days is the magic number or something. So when you use your calendar to tell you what to do with your beer, which is what I did with a particular beer I made, it might work out fine. And maybe you've made a couple of batches of beer and that's how you do it every time and it's always worked out fine. Well, if you're making lighter beers, it may be that that's just the reason. Some beers ferment out in 2 or 3 days, so 14 days is a lot. But in general, your gravity readings should tell you what to do next. In my case, I made a beer, I put it in the fermenter for a week. Fermentation activity slowed, so I transferred it to secondary because that's what Papazian said I should do. And then after X amount of days, I put it in bottles, or primed it and put it in bottles. And then when I opened it, I had terrible gushers. I mean bad gushers. And I thought, oh my God, infection, I screwed up. And it wasn't an infection at all. What I had done was followed all the steps that I was supposed to follow and done it by the book, according to what the calendar says, 14 days and all that. And I overcarbonated because it wasn't done fermenting. So all that CO2 that should have outgassed was still trapped in the bottle, and then I primed it, and I got this huge carbonation, I got gushers, and it wasn't an infection at all. It was just me screwing up. So leave it in the fermenter for longer periods of time. If you're worried about clear beer, let it sit there longer, and gravity will pull the dead yeast out of suspension. If in my case, you have things in the fermenter that you do not want to be in contact with the beer for longer than certain periods of time, that, in my mind, is the only reason to use a secondary. And then now clarifying in a secondary vessel is really using a bright tank. We have always, over the years, called them secondary fermenters, but I think at the microbreweries and all that, bright tank is the accepted term. Especially when it's combined with crash cooling, which helps pull things out of suspension. Nothing wrong with that. It's not really necessary. And I think at the home brewing level, there again, I would much rather just leave it on the keg longer. And you're right, the yeast will clean up after themselves. I noticed that a lot in my bigger beers, Belgian triples and quads and stouts and things like that. So yeah. Really, when you take it and put it in a different fermenter, especially obviously when you prime it, it's really conditioning. It's not really secondary fermentation. So, I don't think it's necessary at all. I think it's just something we've been led to believe is the case. So it's not really what I would do. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I don't think it's necessary in the least. I think that it's... Oh, and you know what? I should speak while I babble on to infection. If you can sanitize your equipment, you can sanitize your fermenter, you can sanitize your racking cane, and you can sanitize your secondary. So the idea about infection is overblown. I think we use that term way too much. We really do. I don't think you need to worry about infection as much as you do. You need to worry about your process, and you need to worry about your cleanliness standards. But it's like oxidization. If you're transferring your beer and you're letting it splash and all that stuff, you're screwing up. That's a process mistake. You should have a longer tube, or you should be racking in a different manner. Oxidization, there's no reason to have that. You need to be careful with that. But as far as sanitizing, just sanitize everything. If you really want to go to a secondary, yes, strictly speaking, anything you do to the beer does increase the chance that you might make a mistake and something might happen that you don't want to happen. But I don't think it's enough of a chance to really warrant how much we talk about it. We just talk about infection too much. And then we scare off a lot of young brewers coming into it by making them fearful of infection all the time. And maybe in certain degree it's a good thing because it makes them worry more about their cleanliness standards. But yeah, no, I think it's overblown. So to sum up, no, I do not think secondaries are necessary, except in specific cases when things are added to the beer that aren't necessarily, desired to be kept in contact with the beer. Oak chips, dry hopping, fruits, things like that. You only want them in there for a certain amount of time. Probably easier to take them off. Or, more common, if you're going to use that yeast cake for a second beer, which I highly recommend. I mean, it really saves you money on yeast. The yeast cake is basically a starter, and it should be very healthy and ready to go. And the deal is obviously certain yeasts are for certain beers, and certain beers, you should go in certain manners when you're doing that, from a brown to a bigger beer, that type of thing, and step the yeast up. If you're going to use that yeast cake, then it would probably behoove you to go ahead and when it's done fermenting and your gravity readings show you've reached your target or it's done, transfer it to a secondary for some kind of bulk conditioning or whatever, or go ahead and bottle it, and then take that yeast cake and dump your new beer on it and keep going. That's it. That's the only reason. So there you go. Aside from that, yeah, the whole thing about you have to use a secondary because that's what Palmer says. Sure he does. Yeah. Anyway, cheers.